You are listening to the Palestine in America podcast. I'm your host, Nader Ihmoud. Today, I'm joined by Laura Albast, an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. Organizations including Jewish Voice for Peace, the Palestinian Youth Movement, American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and American Muslims for Palestine have gathered more than 200,000 signatures on a petition demanding an end to Israel's illegal expulsion of Palestinians in Jerusalem, with an emphasis on the urgency of the situation in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, where more than 4 families are about to be forcibly removed from their homes this month. Other families are also facing illegal evictions this summer. Joining me now to discuss this is Laura Albast. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing during these troubling times?
Honestly, Nader, I'm really tired, but it does not compare to what's happening in Palestine right now. I know a lot of people in the United States haven't had much sleep. Everybody's up trying to follow the news of what's coming out in Gaza and Sheikh Jarrah and Al-Aqsa. That's how I'm feeling right now.
100%. And a lot of people share your sentiment. Tell us a little bit about how, I know that you guys collected those signatures. How did the idea to start the petition start? And tell me a little bit about how you guys delivered that petition yesterday, Tuesday, May 11th, I believe, right?
Yes. So we, as you mentioned, we're a coalition of more than 16 organizations in Palestine and the United States. The groups in Palestine are in direct contact with the families in Sheikh Jarrah, and they're trying to amplify their voices, trying to bring attention, and we realize that we need to put some pressure on governments to interfere and call out for help. So the petition was not the only action that these coalition of organizations have done, but we also sent out an email blast campaign to the ICC demanding that they release a statement similar to that of Khan al-Ahmar. We also had a campaign in Canada, have members of representatives basically come out and make statements, take action, and we're not just targeting governments but also media. So we're trying to get op-eds by residents in Sheikh Jarrah to be published in mainstream media so that people know what's going on. And we're trying to push in Canada specifically for the CBC to cover what's happening in Palestine, because while American and Canadian media have been engaging in concealing the gravity of the situation in Sheikh Jarrah, Canadian media hasn't been doing anything at all. They have not reported on anything. So regarding the petition specifically, yesterday we delivered it digitally to the State Department with over 200,000 signatures, as you stated. And then we gathered at 4 p.m. In front of the State Department and then marched towards the White House. So we had hundreds and hundreds of people yesterday show up during the protest. We had a statement from that was read out from Representative Mary Newman. We had Representative Rashida Tlaib and Representative Andre Carson actually show up and make their own statements and stand in solidarity with us. And then we basically blocked off streets while we were marching, making it very clear that we are demanding that the United States act. We also spoke to a lot of media there, and we made it very clear that we think that it is an embarrassment for the Biden administration and for the State Department not to do anything, to ignore what's going on, especially with the State Department making a statement 2 days ago, refusing to condemn the killing of 9 children. That was really, really horrible of them.
Laura, not to interrupt, but just for our listeners who are maybe unfamiliar with what's going on in Sheikh Jarrah and in Jerusalem and in the rest and everywhere actually in Palestine, what is going on over there? What's going on specifically in Sheikh Jarrah, and what has that led to in other parts of Palestine that has caused all these actions to take place?
Of course. So this isn't something that suddenly took place, right? For years, families living in Sheikh Jarrah have been subjected to assault, to harassment, to arrests, and to threats being forcibly displaced. In 2002, more than 43 residents of the neighborhood were forcibly displaced and thrown on the street, and their homes were taken over by settlers. In 2008, the same thing happened to more families. In 2009 as well, and half of the home of Muhammad al-Kurd, who I'm sure I hope that everybody's following on social media. He is a resident, and he's part of one of the families that is under threat of being forcibly displaced this month. They took over half of his home, assaulted his grandmother, threw their things out on the street, and they set fire to the crib of his sister. She wasn't in it, thank God, but that's horrifying by itself. What's happening right now is that last year, they also there's an organization called Nahalat Shimon. It's a settler organization that is registered in Biden's home state in Delaware. It is funded by American donors and Canadian donors. Some news organizations right now are trying to investigate specifically where all that money is coming from. Nahalat Shimon has been suing these families for years. And last year, a decision came out that they need to be evicted, as everyone's calling it. It's not really an eviction, it's a forced expulsion. It is illegal. They are not allowed to do this. So the families filed for an appeal with the courts in Israel. The appeal was rejected in February. So they filed for another appeal with the Supreme Court in Israel. And just to emphasize, we do not, we do not believe in the jurisdiction of these courts. These courts have no right to take any decisions, particularly as they have no jurisdiction in occupied East Jerusalem. So what's been happening is that the court has been postponing its decision. On May 2nd, they said, hey, come back on May 6th and come to an agreement with the settlers. The agreement was you pay rent to the settlers, and when the head of household passes away, the settlers might sue again and take over the home. So obviously the families refused this. So the court postponed its official ruling on the appeal to May 10, which was on Monday. But because we saw that there were calls by far-right Jewish settlers and groups, including Knesset members, who marched in the Death to Arab march that we saw a few weeks ago in Jerusalem. They called to march towards Al-Aqsa for what they call Al-Quds Day or Jerusalem Day, which is the day that of Al-Naksa of 1967, when Jerusalem became occupied by the Israeli forces, by the Zionist forces. What happened then was what you see now. It is the flare-up. The Palestinians in Al-Aqsa were defending Al-Aqsa. The Israeli soldiers began shooting bullets at them. They besieged them. They have killed and injured hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians over the past few days, just over the past few days. And at the same time, while soldiers were attacking Palestinians in Al-Aqsa during Ramadan, a holy month, for Muslims, soldiers and settlers were also assaulting Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah. So I can't imagine the situation, turning a place of worship into a war zone. I can't imagine the situation of having Palestinians running around the city trying to figure out how am I going to protect my people? My people need me. Noting that all Palestinians are unarmed in Jerusalem. So they're being faced by Zionist settlers and Zionist soldiers who are armed. They have nothing to defend themselves. We've seen footage come out of Jerusalem and Sheikh Jarrah of soldiers entering the homes, breaking things, arresting people who have had their legs broken a few days before by the same soldiers. It's an insane situation.
Yeah, and Laura,
sorry.
I don't know, it's okay, but you described the situation so well, and honestly, it's hard for me to sit here in this interview and act like I am not the same way watching lives at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. of Al-Aqsa being attacked while our brothers and sisters are praying there. And it's hard for me, who is not on the ground there, to keep my emotions in check and to not feel defeated sometimes. And you guys are in communication with the people in Sheikh Jarrah, right? So how are they feeling? Even because the silence from the U.S., there's the statement from the State Department was complete BS, and the media is not really covering the situation correctly. Journalists are really embarrassing. Like, I'm embarrassed for my field, the way I see some journalists reporting on the situation, but they've been doing that for centuries. But how are people in Sheikh Jarrah feeling right now? I know that there's a lot of, celebrities and famous people posting about it and stuff, but how do they keep their spirits up, if you don't mind me asking?
Of course. Honestly, I'm gonna be very honest with you. I don't know how they're doing. I don't know how they're doing what they're doing right now. I don't know how they're getting some sleep. I honestly don't know. But I will. I do urge everybody listening to this to actually watch Muhammad al-Kurd's interviews with the CNN and MSNBC.
Yes.
They are very important, and it's also not important just because they hosted him, but the fact that it was live interviews and he was able to tell thousands of viewers, this is settler colonialism, my family is going to be violently dispossessed, what are you doing about it? The CNN reporter asks him, and I think this went viral, she asked him, do you support the violent protests happening in solidarity with your family? And he tells her, do you support the violent disposition of my family? And I think that is an excellent clip that was aired live for all Americans to see the truth. They are tired, 100%. They are tired. Not only them, but also the protesters who are driving and walking into Jerusalem from neighboring towns like al-Fahim, from Nazareth, and from other towns. Everyone is tired, but no one's going to stop. The Zionist forces, Israel, is counting on us to be tired, so that they can defeat us. But the Palestinians can never be defeated. We have been doing this for 73 years since the Nakba, and we will not be quiet about what's happening to us. And I think, this is, I believe that this is the worst attack that has happened to Palestinians in recent years, particularly on Gaza. And I think everybody is seeing that right now. So any government that hides behind a rhetoric of two sides need to calm down is really being hypocritical right now, because anyone with an internet connection right now can go on Instagram, on Facebook, despite all the censorship, and they can see live exactly how an apartheid state looks like, exactly how an apartheid state acts against Palestinians.
Exactly, and I will second your sentiment about Muhammad al-Kurd. I did see that interview on CNN, and I saw his interview on MSNBC, and he is a very well-spoken individual who flipped a racist and inappropriate question on its head. You would never see anybody ask any other group who was protesting, their dispossession or their ethnic cleansing, and pose a question like that to them. It's unspeakable, except when it comes to Palestine, which is why I started Palestine in America, was so that we can have an outlet that isn't racist against our people, that is reporting on things that are important to us. So I appreciate you joining me on our podcast so that we can discuss this and that we can get the real news out there to people who are listening and paying attention. It's like you said, it's very hard not to see what's going on there. We're seeing the 1948 happen right before our eyes because of technology.
Exactly.
How do you think that, I mean, you pretty much spoke on that, on how you feel technology has played a role, but can you speak a little bit more about how you feel technology has played a role in spreading awareness on this issue?
So I'm sure, as others have seen, if you're an active user on Instagram, there were thousands and thousands of people who tuned into the lives of either Palestinian influencers or activists or just regular residents who were brought onto lives to see exactly when an Israeli soldier killed a Palestinian, exactly when an Israeli soldier arrested a Palestinian. We've never seen that before. We all watch news channels. We grew up watching news channels reporting on Palestine, but it's a whole different experience when the person holding the phone is actively resisting and being attacked. That's a whole different experience. But what I do want to emphasize is that despite this, Facebook and Instagram have continued to censor not just Palestinians in the diaspora who are trying to amplify voices, but also the Palestinians who are in Jerusalem, who are in all of Palestine, that are trying to report and show the world, look what is happening to us. Why aren't you doing anything about it? Facebook on May 6th, actually, everybody woke up, found that some accounts were taken down, including the Kurd siblings, Muhammad al-Kurd and Muna al-Kurd, who have been reporting on everything that's happening in Sheikh Jarrah specifically. We've seen hashtags being hidden, posts taken down for hate speech, terrorism, violating Instagram's community standards, which is hilarious because it is footage of soldiers assaulting women, disabled, and youth, and men, and families. And of course it's terrorism. It's Israeli terrorism. We're not trying to incite anything. We're trying to show the world what's happening. Facebook comes out and says, oh, it was a technical issue, that stories disappeared from archives, that we've taken down some posts and accounts. But the reality is that Facebook didn't just start doing this. Last year, Facebook hired an ex-Israeli official who was known for suppressing and surveying Palestinians on social media. Years after that, Facebook continued to collect data, not just for the Israeli government, but also specifically for the Israeli government, collect data on its users and provide it to the Israeli government for anyone who is talking about Palestine. Huge problem, right? And a coalition of 25 organizations actually launched a campaign earlier this year called Facebook We Need to Talk, so that pro-Palestine voices, Palestinians, Arabs, and Jews can be free to speak about Zionism and apartheid. Now, you know, it's even though they said it's a technical issue, as I said, they continue to hide hashtags. My entire feed sometimes while I'm scrolling is just gray boxes that say sensitive content. Well, obviously it's sensitive content. We need to do something about it then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I also experienced on my personal Instagram about when things were pretty much heating up, that first night of protests, I believe, in the beginning of May, all of my Instagram stories were removed the very next day. And I didn't even notice until somebody told me. And then I noticed everybody else was dealing with the same issue. And then I saw that what you saw there, that there was a former Israeli intelligence person who was working at Instagram, and it was like, oh, how convenient that this was just a technical error. As a journalist, you look at that and it smells funky. You want to dive in and ask more questions, and you're wondering why the media who has access to these people aren't asking those questions. And that becomes pretty frustrating as a journalist myself. And I can imagine how frustrating it is just to Palestinians who are just looking on going, things are obvious, things are right there in your face. Why are you not doing anything about it? So that leads to my next question, which is, what's next? I know that I'm later this afternoon, after this conversation, I'll be in downtown Chicago at a protest for Palestine. But what's next for those organizations that have gathered the 200,000 plus signatures? What's the next move?
So let me just scale back a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned that why isn't the media saying something about this? Major American media, in some ways, is complicit in what's happening in Palestine. I'm going to name out the New York Times. Everybody knows this, right? Mm-hmm. So articles that came out reporting on Sheikh Jarrah were completely biased in favor of Israel. It went as far as calling the Jewish settlers who were assaulting the Palestinians, who are armed, who took over homes, who threw elderly onto the street, calling them landlords. That is not unbiased reporting, in my opinion. But New York Times isn't new to this, right? They have one of their reporters. Her son served in the occupation forces. He served in the Israeli military. Her husband also served in the Israeli military. Israel is basically inside the New York Times right now. And this morning they released new job offer for someone in Palestine to have a detailed understanding of Palestinian and Israeli history, I'm going to bet you they're not going to be hiring a Palestinian.
Yeah, they
They're
won't be
probably going
hiring
to
me.
exactly, no way, right? They're not going to do that. They're not going to actually give us voices. I even know of a friend who reached out to be like, hey, I would like to write an op-ed. I'm a Palestinian. I would like to write about the ethnic cleansing in Palestine. And the editor told her, oh, we can't use these words, you know, we have to tone it down. What are you tone down what? You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
just wanted to emphasize that American media in many ways are also complicit in what's happening in Palestine. And the moment they see something different, the whole world will follow. Because unfortunately for us, the United States is one of the powerful countries around the
Oh yeah.
world right now,
Just
and it's
remove their $3.8 billion a year to Israel,
exactly.
and there's no
Exactly.
way they can continue the occupation of our people. We see the resilience and their strength against $3.8 billion of military aid each year. And still, you have soldiers with guns and armor crying, running away from our people. So, that's a huge part of it. And the New York Times serves as kind of the US's propaganda tool. I remember in journalism school, I looked up to the New York Times. It was like a dream to work there. But then when you started reading stories about Palestine, and even their stories about the Black Lives Matter protests, sometimes were just skewed in too much middle ground. There's a lot of, in journalism, um, there's always, hey, you have to be unbiased and in the middle. And the further along in my career, I've realized no, because technically journalists are for the people. We are here to serve the people, to give people information, correct information, and to protect them from governments and illegal occupations that are just going to be serving all types of BS as news. No, the journalists are supposed to fight against that. But we've seen in the US especially, them just regurgitate what the government tells them, which is not journalism. It's PR. Okay, it's public
Exactly.
relations.
Exactly. And it's not just on Palestine. The reporting on the Middle East and Lebanon, for example, they really do not make an effort to seek out voices from the region. They don't do that. I've had an incident with a New York Times reporter where they were translating one of the firsthand accounts experience that was published during when the Beirut blast happened, and I offered to translate it to Arabic. They said, "Oh, we have our own translator. That's it." And the translation was horrifying. It was horrifying. And I even emailed them and I told them like I'm an Arabic speaker. I'm a fluent Arabic speaker. If you don't want me, that's fine. But can you get it someone who's actually a proper Arabic speaker who can translate? The translation read extremely horribly. It was an embarrassment to the New York Times. It is insane. It is insane that an organization like the New York Times would not seek out voices from the Middle East. It is insane. Just to answer your question specifically on our next steps as organizations. Obviously, we're not stopping this, right? We're standing with the families. We are going to save Sheikh Jarrah. We're going to make sure that these families are not forcibly displaced. Our current next steps right now, we do have a lot of protests happening, especially as Nakba Day is approaching on Saturday. So across the nation in America, there are a lot of protests popping up. Most of them are happening at 3 p.m. ET across the country. At the same time, right now, there is a letter circulating, a Dear Colleague letter circulating in Congress that is led by Representative Mary Newman, in which they also pressure and demand the State Department end all illegal expulsions of Palestinians in Jerusalem. The letter reaffirms that hasn't the U.S. policy always opposed the expansion of illegal settlements, specifically in Jerusalem. So that's the letter that's happening right now. And at the same time, a group of us in the coalition of organizations are leading another letter that is urging progressive organizations to make a statement, because while there has been a lot of attention on Sheikh Jarrah, on Jerusalem, on Palestine, not a lot of solidarity organizations came out and spoke. So we're trying to urge them to do so. Right now, we're monitoring the situation. We're in direct touch with families in Sheikh Jarrah. Anything they need, we will provide. But the future is uncertain. What we do know is we are not going to stop fighting for the rights of Palestinians across all of Palestine.
Laura, can you tell us about anybody that our listeners should be following to get up-to-date news on what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah and the rest of Palestine?
Of course, as we mentioned before, do follow Muhammad al-Kurd and Muna al-Kurd. Muna's reporting in Arabic, Muhammad is reporting in English. They are the only source of comprehensive and accurate information currently coming out of Sheikh Jarrah, especially as Zionist forces are preventing press from entering. So on the rare occasion press do enter, we're not really always seeing the full picture. On everything else, including the folks who are traveling from outside of Jerusalem to defend Sheikh Jarrah, those who are going to Al-Aqsa or in Gaza, I do have 3 more recommendations, including the Palestinian Youth Movement. We have hosted a few lives interviewing Palestinians who have been arrested, including Maryam Afifi, whose footage went viral of a Zionist soldier grabbing her and dragging her by her hair and hijab on the floor while arresting her while she was defending an unconscious girl that was being harassed by Israeli soldiers. Other accounts you can follow are ayakhalaf.official. She has been reporting a little from inside Jerusalem. Tariq al-Umari. Tariq Umari is a photographer. He's from al-Fahim. Al-Fahim has had its own protests earlier this year against police negligence and brutality against Palestinians. He's been in Jerusalem as well, and he's been reporting a little on what's going on, as well as specifically on Gaza. Probably you can follow Takademi with a Q _PS4. They've been sharing all possible news on Gaza on their stories. I'm sure you can find more if you know people there, but I will emphasize that unfortunately only Arabic language media is the one that is giving basically moment-to-moment updates of what's going on in Palestine. English media has not been doing a great job at that, unfortunately. So for those who do speak Arabic, try to seek out Palestine-based organizations like Wakalat Shihab, for example, or just seek out the other Arabic language organizations in the region. I personally follow Al Jazeera sometimes just because I find that they do have some good reporting when it comes to Palestine. And finally, the other media organization, which is also in Arabic, is the Quds N. You can find it on Instagram, QUDSN.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Quds Network because that's one of the ones I follow. They do a good job on Instagram of putting Arabic, English, and then also I think French and Spanish.
Yes, they're wonderful. They're like, I don't know, their team is amazing. So those, if you really want to understand what's going on and you don't want to follow up on everything, Quds Network is pretty good at that.
Awesome. Thank you again, Laura, for joining me. This was a great conversation that I hope everybody listens to and takes to heart. And inshallah, like I said, we will save Sheikh Jarrah and free Palestine, free Palestine entirely. Not just Sheikh Jarrah, not just Gaza, not just the West Bank, all 1948 land and others, everything, inshallah. So thanks, Laura. I really appreciate it. We should do this again. Again, please listen back to what Laura said and write down all those Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, because that's where I've been getting my accurate news from. And that's just been the way that it is, because the US media has been just doing surface level work, if they've been doing it. But besides that, they still are regurgitating Zionist propaganda. So I'd like to thank Laura again for joining us. You're listening to the Palestine in America podcast. We were joined by Laura Albast, an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. She talked to us about how organizations, including hers, the Jewish Voice for Peace, American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and the American Muslims for Palestine, along with 11 other organizations, gathered more than 200 signatures and delivered it to the U.S. State Department yesterday, May 11th. Thanks so much for joining me today, Laura. I hope you stay safe, and inshallah, we save Sheikh Jarrah